It's a lot. You get the introduction is probably the most important part of any sermon at all. So there's no pressure.
You're killing me right
No
now. You're
pressure.
killing me. I look at everyone.
Thankfully, we're among friends.
This is exciting. Really exciting. All right. Do you want to give it another minute or so? Um, I need a minute here. Make sure I can. Eh. All right. All right. Who we got? Julie, Tanya. Hi, Tanya.
Hey,
Katie tuning in from the butt crack of dawn over there in California. Thank you so much for coming. Oh my God, I love this. Cassie, Callie. Oh wow. All right. We got Crystal. Look at this crew. This is amazing.
West Coast is early, yeah.
I know. Yeah, I know. She had emailed, Katie had emailed earlier in the week. It was just like, oh, it's just so hard for us because it's so early. I'm like, I know. I feel so bad. It's because it's a Saturday, and people,
Right.
when I say people, my kids always have activities and stuff on
Mm,
Saturdays, right? So
yeah,
if we
yep,
schedule it kind of like too late in the day, then, Jordan and I end up doing this like scramble thing of like, what,
right.
can you be there? No, can you be there?
Yeah,
Crap. We've got a whole bunch of people about to show up and like none of us can actually like be there for the Zoom. So,
yeah, yeah.
um, and it's just like a modern problem, right? That like no time ever works for anybody. We've been batting around the idea of like we're big enough as a church now that we need to probably start having like an annual meeting for all the
Mm,
ministries. And then
hmm.
immediately we go into like freeze mode because we're like, when on earth would everybody be able to be in the same place? Like not even place, like location,
Right.
but like on a Zoom,
Yeah.
right? What would be a good date and time to like actually make everybody show up? I don't
Well,
know.
I have a place here in the Dominican Republic, so I think if you just say, hey, we're having it here, and then the fun people will show up.
Oh my God. You know what? Don't threaten us with a good
Uh,
time, Devin, because
oh
the
gosh.
next time you're gonna be like, oh my God, all these people, the whole Fifth Element free. We do, it's funny because one of our ministers, she also has she has a retreat center in Peru.
Wow,
She's
really?
offered it up a couple times, and I'm always like, oh my, but like it's the kids, man. It's these kids.
Mm. Yeah. How old are your kids?
My oldest is 17, and then I have a 12, a 7, and a 6. So, and they travel pretty well
Right.
considering it's expensive, right? Like to
Yes.
get
Yeah.
everybody on a plane and like put
Right.
them, bring them somewhere. It's a lot.
And looks like Julie said that she's in the DR also. We're in the DR, are you, Julie?
What'd she say? Oh, she said I'm in for DR.
Oh,
In
I'm
for
in
it.
for DR.
Got
Okay.
it.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
totally
There you
in
go. Look at
DR.
that. Look at that immediate commitment. Didn't have a time or
Nope. No, no. Julie's like
See, it'll be
Julie has that
easy.
I can drop everything kind of life. I love
yeah,
that.
that's a good
Yes,
life to
it's
live.
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, we can get started, I guess. I don't want to keep everybody waiting. All right, so today I'm so psyched that everybody showed up because we have a really special sermon. And I can't wait for everyone else to hear your story, Dr. Devin. So Dr. Devin came to us, I don't know, a couple months ago now. It hasn't been that long.
No.
It's like you sped right through the process.
Yeah.
Um, and Jordan and I met with him and immediately were kind of smitten with his story, his vision, like everything, right? So Dr. Devin's running a big old operation, and he was looking not to do a smaller scale ministry with us, but looking to kind of create his own church, modeled very much after the Fifth Element Free Church. So we were honored, to help him with that, and that's exactly what he did. So in the past couple of months, we've helped him to create Symmetry Chiropractic Mission Center. And he's based in Washington State, although every time we see you, you seem to be over there in the Dominican Republic where he is building some retreat centers, right?
Yeah. It's a whole thing. It's a rough life that I live.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely terrible. So yeah, he, when we first met, he told us his story about how he, basically renegaded his entire way through the COVID pandemic, which of course endeared him to us immediately, right? So when we were, thinking about asking some of our sister churches for us, for help with some of the sermons, he was one of the first people that we thought of. And we said, let's reach out to Dr. Devin. His story is amazing. We'd love to hear what you have to say. So I am going to go ahead and shut up now and let you take the floor. All
Yeah,
right.
thank you. And and it was I was equally smitten because what you guys are doing is so special and so necessary. And that's the kind of the theme and the goal that I hope to have on this presentation or this sermon or this talk is that I can equip everyone that's part of your guys' mission to be a little brighter, and do a little more good, have a little more confidence. And so the chat screen is open. If I miss questions or anything, please feel free to interrupt me. Or if somebody would like me to hit on something a little bit more detailed, I can go as long or as short as needed. And I am up for guidance. I am here to serve. And so use that, because as we're going to dive into, if I can share my screen here. Oh, here we go. Perfect. Look at that. And then go ahead and present this. If you are watching this, I want to congratulate you, because you are a survivor of the zombie apocalypse, and or you're the Walking Dead, and by the end of this sermon, you are going to know how to be the best survivor that you can, and really moving forward in life. I have taken what I've learned here today, and there's two ways that we can deal with the Walking Dead. We can either avoid them or we can light them up. And so that's this survival guide sermon is about lighting up the Walking Dead. And but real quick, like I can see a few cameras. Have you guys seen the show Walking Dead? Yeah. Okay. No, you haven't seen The Walking Dead. Okay. This is I gotta hit on this. So it's very important to understand. There's lots of zombie movies, and there's the I Am Legend zombies, which are like the fast, super smart ones. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about brainless, stumbling around, eating people zombies. Okay, that's the kind of the zombie that we're talking about, and it's really important because I Am Legend zombies is a whole nother book. And the book was actually based on vampires. That's why the Will Smith version is a little confusing. So we all survived the end of the world because like 4 years ago it happened, right? All of a sudden, and I'm take this trip down to Mexico with some friends, and we're in Mexico, and I took my whole team down there for my chiropractic clinic. I've been in practice for 10 years at this point. And then I don't watch the news. It's not that I am against the news. I just don't sit very well. And so when we're in Mexico, we had this idea of like wouldn't it be great if we could just like have a place to like all go and connect? Because when we go on vacations, like I'm a marathon runner, and in order to be tolerable, be flying around me, in order to be tolerable, I got to get up like at 4 o'clock in the morning and then go run 10 to 20 miles just so I could be like pleasant enough around other people. Because back in Washington State, like what I do in my spare time is I built a $250,000 park. I did a renovation of a community center. We built a $1.3 million splash pad. I was served on multiple board of directors for nonprofit organizations. I was the president of three nonprofit organizations that raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for other nonprofits. And that's just like what I do for fun. That's like, and that's just who I am. And that's unbearable for everybody because they go on vacation. What people want to do. My wife is like, she's like, I just want to sit by the pool and read, Devin, just like shut up and let me do that. So we're like, hey, we have this idea of like, let's like a big group of friends, like let's all get a place, and then we'll have somewhere to vacation, and then I can go change the world, and you guys can hang out at the pool, and it'll be great. Everyone wins. And so then it was the weirdest thing happens. It was February 2020. We come back to Washington State, and like all of us got super sick. And like my one friend like lost his taste and smell for like a month and a half, and my brother-in-law was like, who is very politically geared to watch the news. And he's like, you guys have that coronavirus? And I thought he was referring to beer. I thought he was referring to Corona, the beer. And so I'm like, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I drank a lot when I was in Mexico. It's an all-inclusive resort. If you've ever been to one, it's kind of irresponsible not to drink excessively. And so then again, not watching the news, like this conversation piece started to happen more of like, the end of the world is coming and we're all gonna die. And I'm like, well, I'm confused by this. Doesn't really make sense. And again, my patients, all of a sudden, I got to see like a dramatic shift in my patients that I took care of. The people that are like happy, like wonderful people we're all of a sudden like getting like a little more emotional there. And again, at this point, nothing's actually changed yet. Like the coronavirus hadn't hit United States, but I started to notice like these changes happen with my patients, and like started to get a little more emotional, a little more rigid, a little more um, wanting to be isolated, a little more kind of gearing into addiction to feel better, a little more reactive, and just like a little more like tight and like stressed. And and for me, as I finally like had to come to the conclusion that I needed to actually know what this whole pandemic thing was about, I looked into it, and my conclusion was like it didn't kill healthy people. So I'm like, this is a gift from God, right? Like all we have to do is be healthy. I'm like, whoa, like right there. Like this is like I'm watching just like the miracle right now. Like a thing that's like if we just be healthy, we're good. And now we everyone has motivation. And then there's like everyone kind of took a different road. Because I saw everybody just doing things that would not make sense if you're like, hey, if you want to be healthier, what should we do? Like, it would be idiotic to say like I'm gonna stay inside, isolate, and get really stressed and worry, and then just eat processed junk food and sit in front of technology all day long. No one would say that, but that's what ended up happening. And so now there's two different types of people right now. The people that are like, I don't want to be that way, that are the survivors, and now it's almost interesting because the roles have reversed. The people that ended up becoming this Walking Dead, this zombie, like at first were like the emotional, the reactive, the tight, the exhausted. Now what I'm seeing that the survivors have become this. And so then I look over on the other side of the screen here, if you guys can see it, how it says the Walking Dead have become the herd of people, like the people that sum it up are hungry, meaning they are always craving, they are exhausted, and they are reactive and disconnected. And it's very much like a zombie movie where like zombies, they go after people that are alive and they want to eat them until they're a zombie, then they no longer eat them anymore. And and this is a fascinating thing that has become the identity of so many people, that they want to go after someone who is a survivor. However, they don't want them to be all the way dead, they just want them to be dead like them. So this happened kind of firsthand in the pandemic. Is like everyone's like, you should be really worried about this. And I was like, well, I am. And I, as a doctor of chiropractic, I, looked into how to keep my patients healthy and, and also do it in a compliant way. And then what ended up happening is the law, like all of a sudden said that we had to, we had to wear facial coverings and we had to stay home and shut down. And that became very difficult for me because again, if we go to every single zombie movie, it, they could end really quickly, right? Um, if when the first zombie occurs, like if people are just like, hey, that's a zombie, identify it early. And then if someone just said, hey, you know what? I know what causes zombies. They bite you. That makes you a zombie. And then number three is then take out the zombies, light them up efficiently. And if you've Walking Dead, it's like first season, everyone dies really quickly. And then all of a sudden, season number two, they're like zombie killing machines. And so if we back up 4 years, like, and like break down the process that we went through in the beginning of the pandemic, we can accomplish all three of these things and able to then light up the Walking Dead. So number one, identify early. Okay, so zombie ahead. So we identified early on based on three anatomical markers. We have disaffrontation, we have dyskinesis, and we have dysautonomia. Okay, so when the Governor Inslee said, you know what, everyone has to wear a piece of fabric over the face, or else you are threatened with jail time. The and then as people started to follow these recommendations, we started to notice these trends of like decrease in balance and coordination, um, getting more accident prone. Disaffrontation means the inability to perceive an environment accurately. So, for a really kind of an easy way to understand this is, so for example, now we look back, right? It's really everyone's kind of brave now, right? Oh, pandemic, I was never afraid of it, but they stayed home, right? They're able to accurately perceive reality normal right now, right? So disaffrontation means a perceived thing that is not reality. So a good common neurological understanding of this is also uh, like someone with PTSD. They have an experience, and all of a sudden they have a really strong reaction to something that is not a real threat. So disaffrontation. Think of a zombie, kind of like clumsy, bumbling around. And then number two is dyskinesis. Dyskinesis is energy held within the body, unable to relax. That leads to decrease in motor control, decrease in reaction time, stiff, slow. Again, think zombie. And then dysautonomia. So, dysautonomia is the inability to regulate between the fight or flight response and the rest, digest, develop, and heal mode. And that leads to emotional instability, cravings, sleeplessness, inability to focus. Super easy. Identifying the zombies. 3Ds. So, how this occurs and how it roots back in essence to our stance and how we're able to navigate the COVID-19 mandates is think of your neurospinal system as a fuse box system. So is everyone familiar with the phrase rigor mortis? You guys know what causes rigor mortis? I mean, other than death? It's like a weird thing because, we think of flexing is like this takes work, right? I'm flexing my muscle. It's active process. But when someone dies, their body goes into a flex position. Every muscle in their body flexes. So, and the reason is because it actually doesn't take energy to flex. It takes energy to relax because relaxation isn't simply the opposite of flexion. Relaxation is where adaptation occurs, meaning where your body converts stress or trauma or damage into strength. So relaxation requires energy. So when someone's brain no longer produces electricity, then energy dissipates within the body. That's when the body can no longer maintain a relaxed state. So the brain produces electricity, and it give you an idea like how efficient this system is. And by the way, this is just wild in itself. Like our brain creates power, like that powers these fans. It's wild, and it's enough power to simply control one light bulb. That's how efficient our body works, how efficient the electrical control within our brain is. So our neurospinal system acts like a circuit breaker for this electrical system. So when there's a disconnect between the brain to the body, that is where this affrontation occurs and dyskinesis. So, and any part within the body that's unable to relax is, in essence, a form of active rigor mortis. Your brain isn't able to relax it and then, therefore, convert the stress into strength. So, and that leads to what's called dysautonomia. And so we have two automatic neurological processes that happen within our nervous system. We have the fight or flight response, and then we have the rest, digest, develop, and heal response. And this screen that we have here shows what's called heart rate variability. And so, and again, this pandemic's hitting. I'm seeing these radical personality shifts within our patients. Everyone's terrified, and everyone's looking for answers. And we're in the same boat. I knew back in 1918 when the Spanish flu pandemic occurred, that the chiropractic colleges did research that showed that people that are under chiropractic care had a much higher survival rate than those under medical care. So I'm like, well, let's do that. But I didn't really understand why that would be. So I looked online and I found a study that looked at hundreds of thousands of hospital visits. And what they found was that heart rate variability was the best predictive measurement tool if someone was going to die from COVID or have chronic illness from COVID or be hospitalized. So we ended up investing in heart rate variability. And at the time, I didn't really understand much about this, but in essence, heart rate variability is our ability to go from a heightened fight or flight response to then calm ourselves back down. The whole adage of we should have a slow, steady heart rate is actually not accurate. What we want is a very variable heart rate, meaning get upset when you need to and then be able to calm down quickly. And if you understand that one thing, you can understand every single neurodevelopmental sensory processing disorder known to man is the inability for a kiddo to be able to calm themselves down because they're stuck in the sympathetic mode. And there's two pieces of neuroanatomy that control that, the prefrontal cortex and also the vagus nerve. And so this scan measures that. So we ended up investing in this. And what we noticed was everyone's, I mean, myself included, heart rate variability was really, really, really not good. And so, and we found research showing that chiropractic care then improves heart rate variability. So, but then, really, it's like, well, why though is the question. Why is that the case? And what is going on? So it took a pretty in-depth amount of study to kind of understand what neuroanatomy is controlling all this. And so understanding the neuroanatomy of the walking dead then gives us a good insight to being able to help them. And so the first part is the amygdala. The amygdala is right above the brainstem, and it's known as the emotional part of our brain. It's the first part of our brain that receives sensory information. And it's about the size of an almond, and it gives us our fight or flight response, the amygdala. And this little piece of neuroanatomy then is what emotionally drives us. Number two, so it gets very, very strong in The Walking Dead. Number two is the temporal lobes. So the temporal lobes control our processing of auditory information. Okay, so did you guys find yourself in a situation where you're like, if we can just back up a little bit, right? Like very beginning, the conspiracy theorists are like, if we shut down for 2 weeks, 2 weeks is going to turn into 2 months, and then it's going to be a vaccine mandate, and everyone's like, you guys are crazy, that's crazy, and then it was like everyone just forgot that those people were the crazy people, right? And then it just played out, and everyone that was a survivor was trying to help these people, and it's almost as if they could not hear us. It's because when the amygdala is strengthened, the temporal lobes become downregulated. They can't hear. And this is one of the things that I did a full talk that I put on for doctors during this time to help doctors and help regulators. And they were so appreciative of my efforts that they encouraged a continued relationship by continuing to file accusations and investigations against me. And I took it as a compliment and then wanting to get to know me better and better. So did you guys ever notice like people would be wearing a mask and then they would pull their mask away in order to then listen? Do you guys ever notice that? You ever wonder why that was? It's the weirdest thing, right? And the reason is because when there's a fight or flight response, you have a downregulation of hearing. And when you, for example, stimulate the facial nerve, like if you see Jess's daughter there, you can touch their face and that'll kind of like calms them down, makes them feel calm, comforted. And if you notice that, like someone's like that you care about touches your face, like, that's nice, right? It's because when you stimulate the facial nerve, it revs down the fight or flight response. So when someone, for example, wears clothes, right now I have a shirt on, I don't think about it. There's a down regulation of neurology to the brain that occurs. So by putting a piece of fabric on the face, in essence, it down regulated the healing response. It upregulated the fight or flight response. So by taking away for that stimulation, it allowed the temporal lobes to turn on just a little bit, in order to then focus on hearing again. And that's why they would pull it away in order to hear. So temporal lobes become downregulated. So people are very emotional, they can't hear, and they can't process the auditory information. Then the prefrontal cortex, which is the healing center of our brain, and this part of the brain is the part of our brain. Have you ever been just like in the flow zone where it's like you just know what to do, you're doing it, and you're loving the process, right? Like, how did you know? I just did. That's the prefrontal cortex. It actually supersedes thought. I'll say it again. The smartest part of our brain supersedes thought. It simply knows. And so anytime we have a running dialogue, a narrative within our brain, it's actually our amygdala. It's our emotional part of our brain, our slower part of our reptilian center of our brain that's talking. And so the vagus nerve is the part of the brain that comes, and that's the kind of the interesting thing. We break up all this neuroanatomy, but actually, like every part of our nervous system is actually just a continuation of our brain. So the vagus nerve is the part of the nervous system that sends the signals down to the body to then calm the body down. And so the vagus nerve in The Walking Dead is very much shut off, meaning they cannot calm their body down. And so, in the best way to think of this example is thinking of a colicky baby. So the vagus nerve comes out of the base of the skull. Foramen magnum is where the spinal cord comes out. Jugular foramina is where the vagus nerve comes out. So a baby that has any kind of birth trauma or their neck gets pulled out when they're born and they get damaged to that area, that vagus nerve becomes blocked, interfered with, inflamed, damaged. And so therefore, a colicky baby is a baby that can't ever feel calm down. And that's why these poor moms, they will be like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. They often can't latch on both sides. And it's because the upper neck is disrupted. And which is also why in chiropractic care, when you remove the interference from the vagus nerve and allows the brain to talk to the body, these babies immediately go to sleep and they poop too instantly. So the vagus nerve is not functioning in The Walking Dead. They can't calm their body down. And then have you ever been in a conversation where you're like, we've already talked about this, and they're like, nah, they don't remember it all. Or you have kids, you're like, I told you to do this, and they're like, you never said that. That's because when the fight or flight response is engaged, the hippocampus is downregulated, meaning new memories are difficult to form. The hippocampus is downregulated. And that also explains why, again, back to the beginning of the pandemic, we had patients, and I remember it vividly. They coming in, I'm like, isn't this just like people? Why how do we think a fabric is going to stop an airborne virus? Like we all know that farts don't stop, or underwear doesn't stop farts. Like in underwear and pants don't stop farts, and viruses are so much smaller than that. And then people are like, yeah, so stupid. And then we wouldn't see them for a month, and then a month later they're masked up, and they're like, "Well, do you see what's going on in the world?" And it's because the hippocampus is downregulated. So, have you ever heard? Oh, I would never accuse this group of ever getting to the point where they're blacked out drunk. But have you ever heard of someone being blacked out drunk? Uh, and that person will be like, I didn't know what I was doing. And the interesting thing is, they knew. But when you're blacked out drunk, it's because alcohol inhibits the hippocampus, so they're not able to form memories when they're blacked out drunk. And they knew what they were doing though, and so hippocampus is inhibited in The Walking Dead. Cerebellum is the part of our brain that coordinates hand-eye control, proprioception, knowing where they are in space. Also inhibited. And so think of again all these things.
Dana, can you get your hair wet so we can wash it?
Well, it's important. I mean, there's no other way to wash the hair than that.
Dana, look at me. What? I need to wash your hair.
And then the last part of the neuroanatomy of Walking Dead, and again, this is I'm kind of poking fun a little bit, but this is also in order to empower people with a little bit of empathy, because again, these are very real feelings that these people are experiencing. And the substantia nigra is the part of the brain that produces dopamine, and that part of the brain is, you can supply dopamine to the brain via alcohol, technology, drugs. However, that part of the brain then becomes weaker. And so that part of the brain is what is crucial to every single addiction process known to man, because they have no pleasure, and that part of the neuroanatomy is now downregulated. And anyone that is involved in healthcare, what we're seeing right now is a significant increase in people with Parkinson's disease, which Parkinson's is a shortage of what's called L-DOPA, or dopamine production within the brain, and they replace it with L-Dopa as a medication, but that part of the brain becomes downregulated in The Walking Dead, becomes weaker. And that's why Parkinson's or people that are unable to produce dopamine naturally is becoming so prevalent. Okay, so now this is where I can get back into the fun part of the pandemic. Identify the cause of The Walking Dead. In zombie movies, it's so simple. Don't get bit by the zombie. They're slow, they're discoordinated. Like, how does anyone die in a zombie movie? How does anyone become a zombie in this time now? How did so many people become zombified during a part of history where we could have had the greatest strides in health motivated by a virus that did not kill healthy people? The cause of The Walking Dead is, as we already talked about earlier, is simply the blown neurospinal fuses within the body. Activation, PhD out of Japan did a study that showed 90% of activation of the brain comes from movement within the spine. Our brain produces electricity, then this electricity is then carried throughout the rest of the body. So there's two variables. There is how much electricity, how much juice can your brain produce, and then how efficiently can it get to the body. And so there's three things. And this is the funny world about, if there's any chiropractors on here, I'm going to poke fun about chiropractors a little bit. So chiropractors, what we call these neurospinal blown circuit breakers, is we call them a vertebral subluxation. And we call them something different. Like, which is funny, it was like funny to me because, like, if you blow your circuit, if you plug in, 20 things and you blow your circuit breaker, that room no longer works. You don't like relabel the circuit breaker. You don't call it like, call it like a bebop. Now it's a blown circuit breaker. The circuit breaker actually did its job, to protect the house from burning down. And that's all the chiropractors do, is we look to see where circuit breakers are blown in the spine. And that's it. That is it. And it's like, but we call them something different. But in actuality, it's the body doing its job. So there's three causes of blown neurospinal circuits: thoughts, traumas, and toxins. So backing up, early 2020, again, brain that's healthy produces electricity, bodies that move then stay healthy. Three things that cause disruption between the brain and the body are thoughts, traumas, and toxins. And I guess I didn't hit on the simple part of how do you produce more electricity. You guys ready? Like, so much research has been done on this. Again, brain produces electricity. There is one thing that can increase the electrical output of the brain. It is exercise, 3 to 4 times a week, 30 minutes of time. Everyone knows exercise is good for you, right? But the reason why it's good for you is it produces our brain's ability to produce electricity. That's it. That's not because exercise is good for you. It's because it increases our wattage. It's our voltage in order for our brain to control our body. So thoughts, traumas, and toxins, then we're going to break down each part of it as far as the neuroanatomy is involved, because our species existed for about 300,000 years, Homo sapiens. And, there's lots of conversation pieces in the world of like, well, maybe we evolved, maybe whatever. I don't know. I don't know, because I wasn't around then. I'm only around right now, and I only understand what I can measure in front of me. But our nervous system's job is to perceive and adapt to our environment. And for 300,000 years, our species environment was actually more similar to where I am right now, which is out in the middle of the jungle. Like, that was normal for our nervous system. And what was simple was existing in that environment. And that's, there's so much conversations like how grounding is good for us, right? Like being barefoot outside. Of course, that's what our species did for 300,000 years. You take a tiger and put it in a zoo, and the tiger develops health issues. Tigers aren't meant to be in a box. We're not meant to be in a box. And so our nervous system doesn't understand the world that we live in right now. And so it's consistently perceiving and adapting. And so as a doctor of chiropractic, my job is and in lots of complex words, is to manage and treat the vertebral subluxation complex, the blown circuit breaker. So when the government says to me, doctor of chiropractic, who you paid for your license and you have all these rules that are put in place that, and you went to school for a very long time that you paid for, and you have the standard that my job is to manage and treat the blown circuit breaker. And the government then says, by the way, I want you to do the things that blow people's circuit breakers by telling them to be afraid, and they're going to die, and telling them to stay away from each other, telling them to stay inside and don't move, and then regurgitate their air and inject chemicals in their body. And for me, that was confusing. I was confused, because again, it's like if a dentist all of a sudden were told to tell people to gargle with Coca-Cola, I would anticipate dentists to be like, no, that's a bad idea. So I was confused when a lot of the chiropractors did not do what we did, because for us in our clinic, I said, okay, well, my job is to manage and treat the vertebral subluxation complex, and three things that cause the vertebral subluxation complex or the blown circuit breaker are thoughts, traumas, and toxins. And the law said that everyone was required to wear a facial covering and follow these orders unless they would have a negative health consequence from doing so. Okay. It seemed pretty straightforward. Everyone has a negative health consequence for doing it. unless my understanding of neuroanatomy like got lost somewhere. And so when the state of Washington was put us under investigation, we said, hey, we're fully compliant. Everyone's required to wear a facial covering unless they would have a negative health consequence from doing it. And these three things then directly cause a negative health consequence. And so, and we also figured out pretty early on that when even this was someone with COVID, like got adjusted, their oxygen levels would increase immediately. So we had better health outcomes than anybody. Like we didn't have a single patient die. We didn't have a single patient hospitalized, single patient with chronic illness, and not a single transmission within our office. And none of us wore facial coverings. And so I go through this investigatory process. I'm found to be fully compliant. And so they say, and congratulations, Dr. Brossard. You've been so helpful. Would you consider joining the Department of Health? And so I ended up, yes, I've been just trying to help this whole time. I love that idea. And so I ended up interviewing for the Department of Health. I was chosen as the #1 pick for the Department of Health. And then they said, congratulations. It's not official yet because you have to be appointed by the governor of the state personally. But he's going to do he always chooses who we recommend. So you are good. You're good. And so can you guys hypothesize like what the governor of the most mandate intensive state in the country, what he thought when he found out that a chiropractor was able to successfully keep his patients healthier than every other health facility in this state, to my knowledge. And that the thing he just forced every single child to do in the state causes negative health consequences and neurologically changes their brain to be stuck in this disoriented, disaffrontated, dyskinesis status. You imagine how he responded to that information. Not well. I did not get appointed to the Department of Health. And I can laugh about it now as I sit in the Dominican Republic. This is a healing place, though, and not well. In fact, then at that point, waves of investigations got filed against my entire team, and it to the point where they they accused my doctors on my team of what's called moral turpitude. That's the professional equivalent to raping a patient. And so it's a big deal. And the thing is, and I don't judge any of my team because they showed that they could have the power to convince somebody of wearing a piece of fabric to stop a virus, like, which is the same equivalent of stopping a fart with underwear and pants. And so my doctors, they were given a really, really good opportunity, because it was either they're bad, and they've done this egregious thing of not wearing a piece of fabric and keeping patients healthy and not spreading COVID, and calling it moral turpitude. They could either accept the fact that they're bad, or they can simply say that their boss is bad. And so they chose the route of saying that I was bad. And so and I don't blame them for that, because again, once someone becomes this walking dead, they are part of this herd mentality. So there's only one solution, everybody, and you guys are all part of the solution, is you got to light them up. You got to light those zombies up. And so and you got to do it one at a time, right? You got the zombies in the herd, you ain't getting them. You're not getting them. You got to get them one on one, and you got to light them up. So how do you light up a zombie? I think Morgan hadn't watched The Walking Dead. So like the medical profession right now, and this is a common thing that everyone knows that they should do, to not be a zombie. Super simple, is to eliminate negative thoughts, eliminate negative thinking. I mean, just control those 6,000 to 60,000 thoughts that the Harvard study showed that we have on a daily basis. By the way, that 75% of them are negative, and that 90% of them are repeating. That's fun. Just control those. Number 2, quit every artificial food, technology, and addiction cold turkey. Super easy. Just do that. 2 hours of yoga a day. And then surround yourself with fully alive people. Run 6 to 10 miles a day, and eliminate all the Walking Dead from your community, and then eat all raw organic food. So this is right now the suggestion, to be healthy for people. But the simple truth is, when their neuroanatomy is not engaged, when everyone fits into that criteria that we discussed earlier, the thought of simply getting through the day is difficult enough. And so this whole thing, it might as well be the equivalent of telling a zombie that they can do it for The Walking Dead. So the alternate situation, here you go, Jordan. This is how you solve a zombie problem. You hit them in the head right there. Hit them right there. Simple. All right. And now there's the simple thing. Simply resetting the circuit breakers within the spine activates that part of the brain, that prefrontal cortex, by 25 to 35%, and shuts off the amygdala. The simply resetting the circuit breaker. So now this is where our perfectly designed system is so fascinating, because right now, like electrical systems, if I plug 10 things in, it's going to blow the fuse. I reset the circuit breaker, I plug in 10 things, it's going to blow it again. And our nervous system is perceiving and adapting to the environment, and the thoughts, traumas, and toxins are kind of like a load, a neurological load that we're taking on. They're all plugs in our system. If you ever have something stuck on your mind, how exhausting that is. And all of that is like a plug that's plugged into us. So when someone gets their circuit breaker reset, our perfectly adaptable system goes from, okay, maybe 10 circuit breaker, maybe 10 plugs are going to shut you down, to now 11, now 12, now 13, now 14, now 15, now 16, now 17. And I don't know what the upper limit is, but I do know, based on some of the research that we did through the pandemic, and this is where I really gained the understanding of like why is it when I'm talking to people, they seem to be listening, but when I talk to them later again, they don't remember And they didn't actually really process what I was talking about. And what I realize is because all these brain pathways are occurring, that's then locking our body into a stress state. Like right now, if you just come up and palpate your traps, you can feel if they're engaged or not, or any spot in your body. And every one of those spots is a part of your brain that's not communicating to that part of the body. And now it's creating a narrative around that. And so what we have on the screen here is one of the studies that we did where I adjusted people and then I did quite a few patients. One of them was a Parkinson patient. One of them was a healthy young female, and there's a many on other sides of the spectrum. And this was the Parkinson patient. So when you look at the screen, you can see off on one side of the screen, you have a lot of squigglies. Like on my screen, it's from the left to the right. Within the lower quadrant, like so those little pink skulls, those are synapses within the brain. So areas within the brain that are normal associations. And so have you guys ever heard the term neuroplasticity? So what that is the ability for the brain to change. And so when someone's stuck in a fight or flight, walking dead place, that brain is stuck also. And so when you perform a specific adjustment, reset the circuit breaker, and turns on that prefrontal cortex, that creates time for neuroplastic changes to occur, meaning rapid brain changes to occur. So this one you can see from the left to the right, how there's a lot of what's called coherence going on, a lot of crosstalk. And then after each adjustment, so we did 3 adjustments within a 3-hour period of time, and then EEGs. By the 3rd adjustment, many of the coherent patterns have changed. And so, and this next statement I'm going to say is to like the chiropractic audience, because one thing chiropractors get so frustrated with is when they're taking care of somebody, and the person says, oh, I wasn't that bad to begin with, right? And the chiropractors would get so defensive that you were really bad. But actually, what ends up happening is when someone's stuck in a fight or flight response, remember, they don't form good memories, they can't hear, they can't process, they can't control regulate their emotions. And then when you light up their brain, you literally are changing their identity. And the opposite occurs when someone is given a diagnosis. They are forming an identity around the diagnosis. So the goal is with lighting up these zombies is that they no longer identify with the sick version themselves. They no longer identify with the herd. They identify with who they are. And in my belief, moving towards the perfect creation that God made us to be, and be light for other people. And so we can get in a little more detail. I'm kind of pushing up at the top of my timeline. So, and this might be a little more sciencey and nerdy than is entertaining, but this is prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. The limbic brain is the emotional brain. And basically think of it as like a gas pedal, brake pedal. And you can't be in both. And so every time someone gets a chiropractic specific nerve removing, resetting the circuit breaker, it's turning on that brake pedal part of the brain, which again, there's that one study with Phineas Gage, this guy that got a spike through his head, and then all of a sudden his personality changed and he was mean. It's because that prefrontal cortex was damaged. So again, mean people, walking dead people, aggressive people, they're simply people with an inhibited prefrontal cortex. You gotta hit that part of the brain on. And so Walking Dead, this is where they live. They live freeze part of life, or they live in the fight flight mode. And people who are lit up within that prefrontal cortex live in this bottom area of social engagement, of like getting adrenaline from activity and then joy grounded in this back and forth of being able to go from gas pedal to brake pedal. And so I'm a fitness trainer for like a decade, right? I used to work one-on-one with people. I've run multiple marathons. I run the last marathon I ran at a 6-minute 42-second per mile pace. And I've done a lot of one-on-one coaching with people. I've done a lot of talking. And what I realized is that there is no more efficient way of directly moving people towards this lit up type of experience or existence than simply resetting the circuit breakers and then allowing them to create a new narrative. Because I've tried the opposite. I mean, I tried the opposite at a governmental level with state officials with evidence to show, and it did not matter. Because if someone is stuck in the Walking Dead state, they know one thing: they want to take you with them, and they want you to join the herd. But I know that if I can identify and remove, and that's kind of where my new passion and mission is, and this is where I'm so appreciative of Jess and your team, Jordan also, of helping people live well adjusted, is because like really I from the very beginning of the pandemic, I made decisions based on one belief system, and that was like, what was Jesus's example? And and I don't even know, like I even say that I'm a Christian because it's like not even what Christ's example was anymore, and has a lot of stereotypes with him more, because like beginning the pandemic, I'm thought this is the time for churchy people to shine, right? It's like pandemic. I mean, they're like, we serve a God that's bigger than the world. I'm like, yeah, guys. And my church is like, we're shutting down. I'm like, what are you talking about? And my church, they I know. Yeah, I'm like, my pastor was a patient. It's like, he comes in with a mask. I'm like, what are you doing, man? He's like, well, I do this to make other people feel better. I'm like, when did Jesus do that? What are you talking about? And so, again, going back to Jesus' example, and this is in the book of Mark at the very end, he said, you're going to know my disciples based on what they do, not what they call themselves, right? And so the standard that I've set for myself from the very beginning of the pandemic is to be able to handle snakes with harm. And so the Walking Dead, the people that have this overactive amygdala, that's the reptilian center of the brain. And handling those people without harm has been quite the task. And I took a unique road, because there was one road that a lot of people took, which was like, forget them. Oh, no way. For me, you know what? There were rules in place, and I followed the rules. And handling amygdala active people without harm, be able to cast out demons. And this is one that I don't fully understand yet. However, in my own practice, I've seen children that are nonverbal, violent, autistic, unable to go into a classroom, with simply being able to reset their neurospinal circuit breakers and engage that prefrontal cortex. I've seen them be able to speak again, to stop having seizures, to join classrooms for the first time, to tell their parents they love them. And I don't know if it's because of a physical demon or a spiritual demon, but when I look at the demon possession descriptions in the Bible, that seems pretty darn close. And then number 3, and this is a big one that I hold myself to, and the highest standard is be able to drink poisons without dying. And I'm a fan of bourbon, so and that's it. And I used that strategy throughout the whole pandemic. Never got COVID. And I think that standard of drink poison without dying, I think it could point to like neurologically where we're at as a community, because like right now, like people, how many allergies are there to foods and like sensitivities to products? But here in the Dominican Republic, I'll go into villages where they live in absolute, I mean, the shacks, it's humbling. Yet they have a robust, strong immune system because they're able to process these unhealthy environments. So I think neuroanatomy wise, like saying, can you process the poisons in your life? And then the last one, which is this big one for me, and mainly because it's like I was taught how to do it, is heal the sick by hand. And the chiropractic profession has been doing that for over 100 years. And it's so fascinating. Actually, right now I have my colleague, Dr. Bench, who's out visiting, and I'm a chiropractic missionary now. So I go into villages and I provide free care for hundreds of people at a time. And there's this tile here, and it's this P and this cross. And if you look it up, Google the original symbol for Christ with the early Roman Catholic Church, and it's this P and this cross. And my friend Dr. Ben's like, what is that? He's like, I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, I've seen that in Italy. Let's look it up. And it's just simple. And what it is, it's two Greek letters put together. It's the first one, which is CHI, and then it's the second letter, which is RO. It's Chiro. So when I think about my mission and what the mission is moving forward, and I think of how simple it is to really reset circuit breakers, that's become the mission. And that's why I'm so deeply appreciative to Jess and Jordan, because really to go to chiropractic college, four-year undergrad degree, so you're a well-adjusted person, well-rounded student, like $300,000 in student loan debt, to then go through another 4 years of chiropractic college where we learn how to be medical doctors, because at some point they thought that resetting the circuit breaker wasn't enough and that we should be medical doctors also. And really what I've taken on as the mission is simply teach as many people as possible how to reset circuit breakers, because the whole try to change everything else, I failed at it miserably. And so you guys have given me the platform and the education in order to form a church that is now fulfilling the mission of Christ from his original symbol, that is healing by hand, casting out demons, being able to drink poison without dying, and then teaching others to do the same. So I'm forever grateful, because again, I would not have known how to structure this without you guys. And so I'm right at hour right now. I do apologize if it's a little too sciencey and nerdy, and I'm going to leave this on one point, and then I can open up for questions if anyone has any questions. And that is, the United States of America just mandated all of its people to do things that caused decreased connection between the brain and body definitively. And I would like to ask anyone in this group, were any of you asked to sign an informed consent? So with that, thank you again for having me. Is there any questions that I can answer? Or is everyone going to go enjoy their Saturday now?